Alrighty, welcome back, computer science students. Here we have another video. This is a video on inheritance. And to start, I'm going to recap a little bit of what we talked about really quick. We talked about our Phoenix card holder class, which extends the person class, meaning it's going to inherit from it. So the person class is the superclass, Phoenix card holder is the subclass. Phoenix card holder will have its own information, an ID and a block meals, and it will inherit information and uh, data from its superclass, from the person class. So we have a Phoenix card ID, a Phoenix card block meals, and then we have a person ID, person last name, person first name. So many students aren't actually even aware of this, but you do have two different IDs. One is your student ID, one is your Phoenix card ID. They're two different numbers. Um, and these can exist and be fine, as shown. And when we create our Phoenix card holder, we have to make sure that we provide all of the information that we need for our superclass for our person. And so this ID, last name, first name are going to be fulfilled or written in or provided when we create a Phoenix card holder. That way, when we're ultimately done making a Phoenix card holder, all five of these pieces of data are filled in. So let's look at let's look at some methods. So there's actually four things that are worth paying attention to when it comes to talking about methods for inheritance. So there is, I guess within a class, there's calling super, getting our super classes methods. Um, there is inheriting methods. Third, we have overloading, which this one we've already done before, but we're going to be overloading across classes, which I'll show you what that means. And then the fourth one is overriding. Wow, if I could spell correctly, geez. O Verriding. Cool. And the fourth one is overriding. So super, and my handwriting is atrocious here. Maybe I'm getting used to this pen. I'm gonna blame it on that. So super, and we're gonna talk about that, and we're gonna talk about inheritance in this video. And the next video we'll talk about overloading in a little more detail. And in the video after that we'll talk about overriding in a little more detail. And this also leads to polymorphism, which we'll talk about as well. Polymorphism. So these are all useful terms. Super, meaning do something with our superclass. Inheritance, meaning methods are inherited. Overloading and overriding, and polymorphism, which we'll talk about. So let's dive in. So let's look at our first couple things here, and we'll naturally see where these terms and ideas all show up. So to start with, we create and print a PEEP person and a PC or Phoenix card holder. So we create Jules Williams as a person, and we create Jordan Jones as a Phoenix card holder, and then we print them out. Right. So that's the first four lines of our Phoenix card holder example here. So our PEEP we print out, and they have a person ID, a last name, and a first name. And so if I look in the person class and we look at printing out objects, remember when you print out an object, you're actually calling the toString method. So if we look at our toString method here, and this, by the way, that idea of when you print an object, it's actually calling the toString method we've talked about in class, and it's in another video. But that's what happens. You print an object, it calls a toString method. So we print a person, and it will print out the person's ID, last name, and first name. So there it is. The interesting part is when we print a Phoenix card holder, well, Phoenix card holder has overridden toString. Now I'm going to talk about all the details and implications of that. We're going to circle back around to overriding at the end, because there's actually more implications than just writing it when it comes to polymorphism. But for now, just know that both person and Phoenix card holder have toString methods. So when we print a Phoenix card holder, we're going to call the Phoenix card holder's toString method. And the Phoenix card holder toString method, as we can see down here in our printout, prints out the Phoenix card ID and the block meals, how many block meals you have. it also does this thing with super. So super means refer to my superclass to do something, and in this case, refer to my superclass to call its toString method. So in my Phoenix card holder class, I want to call the person person toString method and print that out. So what we get is all the person information we created when we created Jordan Jones. So let's take a look and make sure all this makes sense. When we created Jordan Jones, we gave him a student ID or a person ID, a last name Jones, first name Jordan, and a Phoenix card ID. So translating real quickly, making sure we didn't lose anything here. When we construct our Phoenix card holder, we get the person ID, last name, first name, and Phoenix card ID. Phoenix ID. We also create the superclass or fulfill the superclass requirements of filling in the ID, the last name, and the first name. Now, note, if we didn't do this, we could not create a Phoenix card holder. We'd have an error. It says, the super constructor for person is undefined. An implicit super constructor for person is undefined. So you have to call an explicit constructor. So we have to explicitly call the constructor that we've created for person that takes in 3 pieces of data. So we have to use super. We have to provide the 3 pieces of data. We may circle back around and talk about default constructors here, but for now, super constructor, a superclass's constructor, pass in the right information, set Phoenix ID to the Phoenix ID we pass in, and block meals to 0. So all 5 values are initialized. And therefore, when we call super.toString, we're printing this person information we stored when we created our Phoenix card holder. All right, so our Phoenix card holder has person information. It's passed up using the super constructor, and it's called back down using a super method call. And so that's how we're able to get back out Jordan Jones and 12786291. All right, so that's super. And that's how we can use super. And so the next thing that we're going to cover in this video and talk about really, really quickly, because it turns out it's a pretty simple concept in a way, is inheritance. So if we look at the next 2 printouts, we print Peep's last name and PC's last name, Phoenix card holder's last name. Well, let's look at the actual printouts. We do peep.getLastName. Well, person get last name, that exists, that makes sense. It prints out their last name. PC.getLastName, though, if we look in the Phoenix card holder class, you can scroll through all you want, but there's a constructor, there's get block meals, set block meals, there's get ID, there's get meal status, and there's toString. There is no method defined called get last name. And yet, we can still call get last name and print out the last name. And we don't even involve super, right? We don't have to refer to super. And that's because with inheritance, by default, or I guess when you inherit, you also inherit, or when you extend, you also inherit all the methods. So all these methods are basically copied down into our Phoenix card holder class, or at least available to our Phoenix card holder class, so that the person component of them, the part that holds this, Jones Jordan's ID, first name and last name, can be printed and accessed and used by calling a method. So these methods are inherited and available. And remember, all of this operates on the basis, the idea, the requirement that when you create a Phoenix card holder, you are also creating a person, because every Phoenix card holder is a person. And so all the information that a person would have to have is provided when you create your Phoenix card holder. And so you can call person methods because the data is there. The information has to be there. You can't create a Phoenix card holder without creating or providing the information needed to create a person. And so all the methods and things you can do with a person, you can also do with a Phoenix card holder. So those are inherited methods that are available because a Phoenix card holder is a person. Every Phoenix card holder is a person. So that's an important part of inheritance, of extending a class. And so we'll jump back in our next video series and talk about overloading, and specifically overloading between classes.